So does God allow bad things to happen? Yes, he does. But does he cause bad things to happen? I think that one requires a little bit more of an explanation. And considering everything that we see happening in the world around us, it's definitely a question that a lot of people are asking and a lot of people are looking for answers for. So let's talk about it. I mean, what better way to live than like royalty? Okay, so the first thing we have to understand about God and always remember is that everything about him is good. Everything about him is right, and everything he ever created was good. Even when we look at Lucifer, Satan, the devil, when he first created him, he was good also. And we could talk about that and examine that in another video, but that's what we have to understand when we think about everything happening around us and why things are the way that they are. But to help us remember that and understand that, we can go straight to the beginning, the book of the beginning, and that's Genesis. So if we go to Genesis, the first chapter, we can clearly see where every time God created something, he said that it was good. All right? So let's look, Genesis 1, let's start at verse 10. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. It was good. All right? Now let's go to 12. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. All right, good. Now let's go to verse 21. And God created whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Again, good. Now let's look at one more. Verse 25. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. All right, so over and over we read in Genesis where God created and he saw that it was good. All right, so everything he ever created was good, right? But the one thing we often forget is that God is also a just God, meaning he will always honor his word. God is the ultimate standard for morality. He set the standard for what right and wrong is. He set the standard for what good and evil was. And he set that standard and he put principles and laws into place that follows after that as well. So due to the principles and standards that have been put in place, we can always expect a response, right? The response will always happen. Not that God necessarily is doing it or causing it, but because he already put these laws and principles into motion, so they will always respond or react. So the same way in the earth realm, we have for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. That same thing exists in the spiritual world, because when you think about it, the earth itself was shaped after heaven. It was created. The same laws and principles that I play here are just mimicked and imitated in an imitation of what's happening in heaven. So the invisible world is more real. The spiritual world, the kingdom of heaven, is more real than the world that we see around us. So this world is shaped after heaven. And when we think about that, we can understand better when Jesus said that what you bound on earth will be bound in heaven, what you loose on earth will be loose in heaven, meaning that what we control, what we do here, something happens in the spiritual sense, in the spiritual world as well. And we can talk about that in another video too. But all of this will help us understand better why these bad things are happening and what's causing all of these bad things to happen. Because when you look at it at the base, is it God? Yeah, we can say that, but it's not necessarily God. It's us. Because when he gave us all of this stuff, when he gave us the earth, when he told us to do this with the garden, when he told us to be fruitful and multiply, he also gave us things that we shouldn't do and told us if we did do them, then what would happen. So to look at that, we're going to stay in Genesis, but now we're going to go to the third chapter, right? So here we're going to examine where God told them about everything in the garden. He told them about the tree of good and evil, and he told them not to eat of it. So at the time when God created everything, it was good. Remember, everything he created was good. Adam and Eve were good. The garden was good. The earth was good. Everything, all of the fowls of the air and the fish of the sea, everything was good. So now he told them, don't eat of this tree of good and evil. Why? we have to understand that at that point, all they knew were good. Everything about what they were experiencing was peaceful. It was joyous. It was happiness. It was love. It was grace. It was all of these good things that they had and that they were experiencing. Why open yourself up to evil? Why now understand evil deeds and understand jealousy and understand greed and pride and all of these other things which the knowledge of evil was? So if they had no knowledge of that, why would God want them to be opened up to that? At this point in time, we were at our purest state, meaning everything we knew and could do was good. We could not do bad at this time. But when we think about the word evil in general, we can't just think about bad and wrong and all of that, because evil also means adversity, unpleasing, it means misery, it means pain. All of these things they didn't know. The only way we could do bad is if we ate of this tree. And, that's what happened. So, the story. The serpent came, started talking to Eve. Eve started questioning, got, oh, okay, I want to be like that. I want to know that. Ate the fruit, gave it to her husband. He ate the fruit. Now their eyes are open. Boom, they sinned. They disobeyed God. And then after they disobeyed God, what did he tell them would be the consequence? He said, the day that you eat of this tree, you will surely die. But what happened? The day that they ate of that tree, they didn't die, but they were sentenced to death. So they died almost 1,000 years later, because that's just how merciful and gracious God is. But God still had to follow through and honor his word. He still had to cast that judgment on them because they disobeyed and they did something against his word. That's the biggest thing we have to understand. He is a just God. He will always honor his word. The standards, principles that he put in place, if they're followed, you will get and reap the benefits. If they aren't followed, you will reap the consequences, more or less, to say it, that way. So once they ate of that fruit, they opened themselves up to that. Again, God gave us free will. We have the choices. We make the decisions. He gave us that ability. That's an act of his love, because there's no love in a person controlling you. There's no love in God controlling us. So that's a way that he shows his love to us, giving us the ability to think freely, to do freely, and just letting us know that what we do, what we say, we have to account for that, either now or later. So that's him casting his judgment. And sometimes we see it now by the things that we cause to happen through what we do, and sometimes we're going to see it later when the day of judgment comes. But I don't want to go on that. I really just want to focus on this main question of, does God allow bad things to happen? Does he cause bad things to happen? When you look at it in its truest and the most basic sense, yes, he does, because he created all of these different standards. He's the ultimate standard for morality. He put all of these different principles at play. So whatever we do, whatever we say, there's going to be a reaction, because that's the way that the world was set up. So is God responsible for it? No. We can't say that he's responsible for it, because it was our choices that caused these things to happen. So when we think about the things that are happening around us, what we see happening in society based on what we see happening in politics, what we see happening in our individual lives, the decisions that we're making, the way that we're going about doing certain things, the things that we're saying, all of these things has an effect on the world around us, whether we want to believe it or not. I mean, we should. And that's something that God told us and gave us that should be a principle or kingdom key for us to learn how to live a more prosperous life. But instead, we're seeing the opposite happen, and all of these bad things are starting to happen around us. So we can't be naive and think of God as this mystical creature, mystical being. And no, God isn't manipulated. We can't change who he is. We can't change the standards that he put in place and think that we can do whatever we want. We can say whatever we want, and then nothing will happen. I mean, the law teaches us that with the law that we have in our cities, in our countries. If we disobey those laws, there are consequences. I was watching a video, and this man said that I told my kids, you can choose to do whatever you want. You can choose your action, but you can't choose the response. You can't choose the consequence. So if you do something wrong, you can't say, okay, I want this punishment. No, you have to accept the punishment that's going to come based on the action. And that's something that we don't like to accept as Christians and as believers, that we have to accept. Punishment is a harsh word. We have to accept the correction. Because I truly believe when we talk about free will, when we talk about all of these things that we have to understand how our actions are causing it to happen. So if it's our responsibility, then it's our consequence. It's not God doing it to us. It's us really doing it to ourselves because we know better. He gave us this word. He gave us all of these things to help us live a better life, to help us be above, to help us be prosperous. And if we aren't, then it's because we aren't using this the way that we should. And that's something that's hard for people to accept, because how is God showing his love by causing all of these things to happen, or by having these standards in place? Well, like I said, he's given us the blueprint to live a good life. He's given us the blueprint to live a peaceful life, a happy life. And whether we choose to follow this blueprint or not is up to us. But if we choose to, we will reap the good of it. And if we stray away from it and do things outside of his will and we know better, then we'll have to deal with what living outside of his will brings. Again, I don't want to get too far into any of those things. I really just want to answer or attempt to answer the basic question of, does God cause bad things to happen? If we want to be straightforward, then sure, he does. But if we want the real answer, no, we do. Because of the things that we choose to do, because of the things that we choose to say. We have to understand that there are responses or reactions to everything that we choose to do. For every decision that we make, we will have to account for it, either here or later. So we can continue to place blame in other places, but we need to look at ourselves and examine our own self so that we can understand how to change what we're doing, change what we're saying, so that we can start to get a different response. All right? So I hope this was helpful. Just remember this, believer. If you are experiencing any hardships, any unfavorable conditions on your life, then that must mean that you aren't living in accordance to the word. You aren't doing the things that the word has outlined for you to be doing so that you can have more favorable, results in your life. So start to examine those things, start to look at that, start to think about that. And I promise you that your life will start to change and that you will begin to become a beneficiary of this word and live according to your kingdom rights as a kingdom citizen, as royalty like you are. All right? So see you next time. Peace.